one more minute until we start the session. Okay, so we're going to get started. So if you're just joining us, welcome to the second WHERE webinar of the day. And if you were in the first session, welcome back. I'd like to begin by first acknowledging the land I am on here in Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse peoples. So just before we begin, there's a couple matters of business I'd like to cover. First of all, there will be time for questions at the end of the session, so please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to pose any questions that you'd like the speakers to answer. And only use the chat function for sharing links or comments, and keep the questions in the Q&A function. You can also upvote a question by liking it, and we'll pop it to the top of the list in the Q&A. So please note that the sessions are being recorded, and all the links will be shared publicly with all of you afterwards. So our second session today is in partnership with Lensing Fibers and is sponsored in part by South Pole, who is actually offsetting the emissions associated with our webinars. So this session will focus on collaborations that accelerate material innovation. And here to lead the discussion and introduce the panel is Trisha Carey, who is the head of global business development at Lensing. So welcome, Trisha.
Thank you, Anna. Appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion and all the work that you and Kelly are doing to raise an awareness and educate the market. The topic that we have today around circularity is one that we're all trying to figure out. And I think, there's a lot of great examples of what's happening in the market. And when we see that we have 50 million tons of textile and apparel waste globally, in the United States alone, we have 16.9 million tons of textile and apparel waste. We know we have a lot to tackle. As we approach this decade of action and we look at ways that we can build back better out of the pandemic, it is through the collaborations that we need to address the changes around circularity. So with that, the panelists today that are joining, we have Ellie from Canopy, and she'll be talking a little bit about Canopy's next generation. She'll also be providing a presentation. We also have Jordan Nodarsi, who is creative director and founder of Boyish Jeans. So I will start off with a brief presentation about Lensing and what we're doing so that you have some information. And then Ellie will present, and then we'll go right into our questions that we've prepared for some dialogue, and then open to questions from the floor. So now I think everyone can see my screen. I just wanted to provide some background information around Lensing and who we are. So Lensing is a wood-based cellulosic fiber producer. Our headquarters is in Austria. We have 7 manufacturing facilities around the world. We're over a $2 billion company that produces 1 million tons of fiber a year. We have 7,000 employees, and our brand names that you are probably aware of are Tencel for our lyocell and modal, and Lensing Ecovero for our viscose. Now, how we approach fibers in the market, we use wood as our resource to produce pulp, which we then add a solvent to in order to extrude the fiber. Our end-use product categories are ranging from non-wovens, so it might be facial wipes, baby wipes, cleaning products, and then we also have a range of products that go into textile applications. And here our direct customers are yarn spinners, who then make the fabric, and it could range anywhere from denim to knits, woven fabrics. And you'd find us in brands for shoes like Allbirds, UGG. So we really have a wide range of end-use product categories for our fibers. Besides using wood, we also introduced a fiber in 2017, which is our Tencel Lyosa with Refibre technology. Here what we're doing is we're upcycling cotton waste in order to make a pulp. We blend that cotton waste pulp with a wood pulp And then we add the solvent. It goes through a closed loop process. We also add a fiber identification, and then we extrude the fiber. So this Refibre technology is our way of looking at next generation solutions. It is available now. It's not something that's just scaling up. It's not something we're only trialing. We have been running this fiber since 2017. We started actually in 2017 with 20% post-industrial waste for the pulp. Now we're at 30% with a mix of post-industrial waste and post-consumer waste. So we continue to increase the amount of waste content recycling within the pulp. We also have a fiber identification that we add, and this is important because there are more challenges and questions around transparency and traceability.
Sorry, Trisha.
Yes.
Your slides are not advancing.
Oh, they're not. Oh, okay. Do you see it now? Are they moving?
It's just the first slide, the title slide.
Oh, okay. Let me refresh. I'll stop sharing for a minute and let me go back. Thank you for letting me know that,
Sure.
Kelly. Let me go back and I'll try that again. Here we tested it and it, okay. Do you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, great. I'm just gonna move up. I'm gonna leave it in this mode. Maybe going to full screen mode didn't allow you to see it. So information about lensing that I mentioned, how we approach producing fibers, and then what we have here is our next generation solutions that are available. I was discussing around the quality of the fiber. I think a part of our success from 2017 is the fact that we're able to produce a fiber that has the same strength, hand, and dye affinity as virgin Tencel Lyosa. This has made it easier for the supply chain to process the fiber in the spinning as well as in the weaving, knitting, and dyeing and finishing. We have global partners that cover all product categories: knit, woven, denim, and home. And we have commercial programs at a variety of different retailers and brands, of course, one of which is Boyish. And the product certifications that we carry range from the EU Eco Award to the RCS certification. This really is a textile to textile solution that we can provide the entire product. Going forward, what we're considering for the future in our vision around next generation solutions, we recently released our sustainability report that included our 2025 goals, which is to offer viscose modal as well as to continue with our lyocell offering of fibers. So expanding beyond just lyocell, having viscose and modal that will have recycled content, going up to 50% post-consumer recycled content. So as I mentioned, we started in 2017 with 20% post-industrial, and our goal by 2025 is to get to 50% post-consumer. So this is really, an incredible goal that we have as a way of bringing more circularity into our production process. We laid out some of our time frame for doing that, and we know that the only way to reach these goals is to have continued partnerships, and our goal is to have 25 key supply chain companies as partners. We also will continue to have the transparency and traceability elements related to Refibre technology. So that gives a little bit of how we view for the future. I will now shift over to Ellie, if you would like to give your overview on Canopy.
Great, thanks very much, Trisha. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you very much to Fashion Takes Action for putting on this WEAR webinar series. My name's Ellie Dinage. I'm a corporate campaigner with Canopy, and I'm calling in from Vancouver, which is on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to Canopy and our initiatives. So Canopy is an environmental not-for-profit. We were established just over 20 years ago now, and we partner with the forest industry's biggest customers to transform supply chains that help protect forest species and climate. We collaborate with both brands, producers, and also innovators to scale up solutions that protect endangered forest ecosystems. So over 200 million trees each year are cut down to produce viscose and rayon that goes into our clothing. And over 3 billion trees are cut down each year to produce paper packaging products. This is clearly directly at odds with climate and biodiversity targets that we need to reach by 2030 and by mid-century. And so we have partnered with hundreds of brands, and you can see just a subset of these here through our Canopy Style and Pack for Good initiatives to ensure that the viscose and packaging that they use does not come from the world's most ancient and endangered forests. And we collaborate together to implement solutions that help take pressure off forests. So as Trisha mentioned, one of these solutions is next generation solutions, and these are lower impact alternative fibers to forest fiber that can go into both fabrics and packaging. For instance, using leftover wheat straw as an alternative source, or using recycled textiles to make new clothing. And so I'm looking forward to sort of diving deeper into these solutions throughout the discussion, and I'll hand it back.
Great, thanks, Ellie. And Jordan, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have any slides that you would like to show at this time.
Sorry, I was looking for the mute button. No,
okay.
I don't. I have my fiber guidelines I was going to go through. I can do that now or later. It's up to you guys.
I think it'd be great if you could give a little background around Boyish and your mission and vision, especially related to circularity.
Definitely. Yeah. So, you know, the great thing about having a brand is that I'm able to work with a lot of amazing companies out there that are really striving to make fashion more circular, more sustainable, and most importantly, increase the quality of the products at the same point in time. This is actually how I got connected to Lensing was, you know, Tencel Lyosa, which brought me into a unique perspective because of the way that they produced it. I looked at it very much as my same sort of design aesthetics of designing circular in the format of not just picking materials and making products, but figuring out which materials should go in or which fibers should go into our materials. Therefore, knowing that after the products are done being used by the consumer, that they would be able to circulate back into either new products or at least if they don't somehow manage to get circulated into the industrial recycling, that they end up in the ground, they biodegrade. And so, you know, the foundation of Boyish was to figure out how to not just do that, but educate our consumer to understand more so what we're doing. Because obviously the biggest topic with sustainability is going to be, you know, for lack of better words, proof, or what some people might call transparency, but I don't like to use the word transparency because that's been butchered by a lot of the bigger brands out there that can point you know, a camera at one small part of their factory or whatnot. There's a lot of ways to manipulate sustainability, shall I say. So one of the things that we try to do is to really think of it like as if we're going to school and we're being graded. And we use our consumers as the ones to kind of grade us. And we use as much proof as we can to convince them that what we're doing is the right thing. But also the most important thing is accountability, because you can't be sustainable unless you're accountable, which is always constantly identifying areas where you can improve and being open to when you're wrong so that you can try to figure out a better solution for it.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. And I like that analogy to being a student and how you're being graded. I think that really can put it in the right perspective. And transparency is an overused word, as well as sustainability. Yeah, I think we definitely have some challenges around that.
Definitely.
So I'd like to get into, now that we've had a basis of what all of our companies are doing, want to have a discussion around what we do see as some of those challenges. moving from a supply chain to a supply network, which is a way that I like to phrase it, because it's in circularity, it's no longer about who you're selling your product to. Just like Jordan, you're talking about being graded, it's much broader than just thinking of the next step. And this supply network really needs to revolutionize our textile and apparel industry. Actually, it becomes a textile, apparel, retail, consumer network if you look at how it's all embracing, all encompassing. And the challenges are many, some of which we've raised in our own presentations. We have technology, we have new systems, we have to look at education, there's funding that's required. There's even common language, I think, is another challenge that we face. But what do you see as the greatest challenge for the future? How do we bring circularity in? Ellie, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think thanks to online channels and documentary and social media and so on, consumers are becoming increasingly interested in the impact of the clothing that they buy in terms of not only what it's made from, but also the packaging it arrives in. Yet still, so many consumers are unaware that clothes made of viscose and rayon are produced using trees, and that many of these trees come from ancient and endangered forests. And on top of this, as I mentioned, 3 billion trees are cut down each year for packaging. And as we rush to phase out the use of plastics, pressure on forests increases exponentially. So I think as we find ourselves in this decade, the time turnaround climate decade, we need to do everything we can to take pressure off forests, and there's clearly still some awareness raising to be done, and we're working to do that, as are many of our brand and also producer partners as well. On our social media on Canopy's Instagram and LinkedIn pages, there's some fun and creative assets to help raise awareness. So I'd invite everyone in the audience to take a look and help share these. But I'd say one of the greatest challenges as we move ahead will be really ensuring that as we work to eliminate endangered forests from packaging and fabrics, we need alternatives. And luckily, these can come from the mountains of textile waste that we've produced. So the next step would be for us to really work together to scale up innovations that enable these alternative fibers, such as using recycled textiles on agricultural residues to become mainstream. And finally, I'd say that price premiums can't be the block. So sustainability and circularity really do need to be widely accessible if we're to move at the pace that we need to.
For sure, yes. And Canopy's been doing some incredible work, starting first with raising the awareness around responsible forestry and what is being done in the viscose world. From a lensing perspective, we do have a global wood pulp policy that is, we use certified and controlled wood from FSC and PEFC sources. We do participate in the annual hot button report, and there's an independent audit that is done for that. And I think Canopy, has wonderful resources all available online. And then this other step that over the past several years, Canopy has really done a lot to increase the awareness around next generation solutions, including the report that you came out with. I think it was the end of 2019, kind of a little bit of yeah. So I think these are all great ways of trying to figure out those challenges and where we go. Jordan, what do you see as the greatest challenge for the future around circularity?
The blissfulness of ignorance. What you don't see don't hurt you. And I think a lot of bigger companies understand that. Not that they understand that themselves, but they understand that consumers are like that. So the biggest issue, at least on my side for a brand, is the challenge of bigger companies with really good marketing strategies, that they can figure out how to practically do nothing and manipulate people's mentalities to pretty much keep them in what I like to call the slave cycle, which is the slave of work hard, burn out, and in this process, give us back all the money that we just made you work for. And this is where, we're trying to get people to sort of wake up. I always like to use the old philosophies of ancient Greece, because it's like this has been going on for thousands of years. Plato's allegory of the cave is the perfect perspective of how to open up your mind and realize what's going on in society. And what the most important thing is going to be is that we need to educate and understand. And understanding is really important, because the empathy of understanding is how we're going to be able to continue to improve, while knowing that there's other people out there that are maybe making things harder for you. And so, this is something that I say, and it's easier said than done, because you get on two angles. You're going to get two different customers. You're going to get the customers that are going to fire things out like as if they're Trump, which means there's going to be no proof. Somebody probably told them, they didn't look it up. And once again, this is why I use the school analogy. Imagine going to college and writing an essay that's just all fake, that has no proof, that you just made up. It's like, well, you're going to get an F. And so this is what the perspective of making sure how we improve on things is, that not just us, but also other companies are going to have to learn how to educate customers and show them this is how we got to this decision. We're not just being like, we saved millions of water. Where'd you get that number from? How did you do that? Oh, well, the machine company told me that we saved millions of water. And so I'm like, all right, well, where did they get their numbers from? And, it's like this telephone game of people just slewing out fake information. And our biggest challenge is that you just got to do the best you can, not be afraid of people calling you out. If you end up doing something wrong, who cares? Admit it. This is the best thing about sustainability reports, is sustainability reports that are there to tell you what we did wrong, what we're doing, and what we want to do better. It's not like, hey, please, everybody come, troll me on Instagram and tell me everything I'm doing wrong. It's constructive. And so that's the most important thing that we feel like is going to change this innovation, is going to be the constructive mentality of understanding and the empathetic connection to the consumers.
Yeah, Jordan, I think you bring up a really good point around kind of this whole way that companies need to look, that it's progress over perfection. Instead of saying, we're doing all this and it's great, it's fine to say, this is our goal, this is our vision. And there's even some visions that I've been hearing of lately, that they realize the technology doesn't exist today to get to that vision. And so there's a lot beyond, which gets into collaborations. And I think, you've made that very clear in your brand values. And you've also done so much to look at how you can design into circularity of what materials are available now, as well as kind of pushing the supply chain further, pushing some of the mill partners further on what they can do to develop even more. And in particular, you've actually been to our headquarters twice, and we were fortunate enough to go right before lockdown in 2020. How do you design into circularity? As a designer, you have access to many materials, but how do you design into circularity? How do you look at the total garment?
I like to use, the best example would be a chef. I mean, you can go to Olive Garden and get pasta. Or you can go to that really nice mom and pop shop that, you know the people that are making the food, that they go down, they've told you about everything. You can taste it. And that they're going down to local suppliers to get the freshest ingredients to make the best pasta that you can have. And you can taste it, you can smell it, you can, it's an experience. And that's because these people go out of their way to make sure they're doing things the right way. They can easily just contact some big company to come drop off a bunch of, awful, produce and ingredients that, yeah, sure, they'll make food and sure, like you'll eat it and probably won't taste all that bad, but that's the whole point of quality and progress, is that if you can improve, if we can do things better, if we can localize, this is where the success of future will become, because, things are getting out of control. People are forgetting, like, oh, let's buy fabric all the way from this part of the country, send it all the way halfway around the world, and then send it other. And people are forgetting, it's like, and that's only just buying fabric. That fabric company then bought cotton from, all the way on the other side of the hemisphere, boated it. And it's like, all this transportation cost is ridiculous. And the efficiency value is what we look at. And when I'm designing, in circularity, fiber is always the most important because the most resources go into producing fibers and materials. And, which is also why, we've been asked a lot of questions in the denim world because a lot of other brands are talking about, oh, why don't you talk so much about how you wash your jeans? I'm like, well, because that's like the easiest thing. It's just like, people should just be doing that. That's this normal. It's just 2021. It's just like, we're just in this era. It's like, why do we need to do that? Right now, the biggest thing is going to be resources. And cotton is a very thirsty crop. It can be done well. And, I love cotton. It's one of my favorite fibers, along with a lot of the man-made cellulosic fibers, because I like to blend them. And that's kind of the way that we kind of figured out how to design circular. Is the one most important thing is that in fashion, you're going to produce garments. Every garment has waste. I know that's been a big topic of discussion. For instance, jeans, somewhere around about like a quarter of the material that we're going to be using is going to become waste. Now, most people just be like, well, that's the factory's problem. They can deal with it. I don't care what happens to it. It can go into, the ground and just, biodegrade, or, I don't care. They can downcycle it and it can turn into something that's obviously, inferior to that particular use. But we kind of view it as that's our burden. We can't just, I know there's different countries around the world that view littering as a different, more severe and less severe. But, in the US, we have less accountability here. I see people just throw things out of their car, and it is disgusting. And that mentality has always been engraved in my mind, seeing people smoke and throw cigarette butts just out their window. That to me is not somebody that's contributing to not just society, but contributing to their own personal life and well-being. So when we think of designing, we got to think everything, what's coming out of it, how we're going to utilize these resources, how do they affect the environment, what's going into these resources, how far are they coming from? So you got to kind of add it all together. It can get, I don't want to use the word complicated, but the best word to probably describe it would be sophisticated. It's not easy, but it's not hard. You just got to do the work. It's no different than exercising and working out. If you do it, you'll get the outcome, but you can't just do it sometimes. It has to become a mentality. It has to become a sort of lifestyle of getting involved. And when you get to that point, you're going to look back and be like, man, I remember when I first started, it felt like it was so far away, my goals, until you just get the momentum built up. And building that momentum is really what sustainability is, because it's like, in the beginning, you feel like I'm doing everything wrong. You start doing things. You feel like this is difficult. Every time I choose something new, somebody else is telling me there's something better. But you'll start to get your momentum, your feel, your own personal touch to what you feel is most important, because there is different atmospheres. Some people are focusing on laundry and saving water and dyeing and things like that. Some people are focusing on fibers. Some people are focusing on recycling. Some people are focusing on the ethics and morality of garment workers' conditions. And some people are also even taking it a step further into social atmospheres and how it goes into the community. And there's some people, not to use, for example, boyish, but we like to look at everything. How do we do everything? Sometimes that's probably a bad idea, but in other ways, we like the challenge.
Yeah, I know you like a good challenge. And like I said, you're always pushing further. And when you were saying it's around a lifestyle, I think it's very much, I grew up more in the 80s, and we were just starting to get into recycling, even cans and plastic and paper. And look how much that's become a part of our lifestyle, where you have recycling bins that make it easy. And I think this will also have to be a change in the lifestyle of recycling textiles too, how we can make that accessible. And Ellie, Canopy has done so much to look at next generation, supporting the industry, coming up with those solutions. What is the vision of Canopy, and relating this back to, your mission and how you see that evolving?
Yeah. Well, as we all know, global scientists has said that we need to protect at least 30% of the world's forests by 2030 if we're going to solve the climate crisis that we're in, and 50% by 2050. And if we're going to do that, we need to find alternatives for making viscose and for making paper and packaging as well. So we have what we call next generation solutions, and these refer to technologies, processes, and also products that prevent forests from needing to get cut down and instead use lower alternatives. So Canopy envisions that we can actually remove 50% of the wood pulp that goes into paper packaging and viscose by material reduction, so designing products that have a longer lifespan that can be reused, along with these next generation alternative fibers. So as I mentioned previously, these include things like making paper and packaging from agricultural residues like leftover wheat straw, or making viscose, for instance, from used cotton fabric or even microbial cellulose. And compared to conventional wood pulp, next generation alternatives use lower carbon feedstocks. They require less water, less energy, and also on average far lower chemical inputs as well. So in terms of viscose specifically, there are currently 3 next generation products on the market that Canopy is really urging and supporting brands to use more of. So that's of course Refibre by Lenzing, that uses a mixture of pre and post consumer recycled cotton waste, as well as Refibre by Adita Birla, Revisco by Tangshan Shanyu as well. Which some of you also may know as Circularity by Renewcell, which is the pulp producers branding. So we're encouraging brands to help scale up all of these next generation products that are on the market, and to really help implement sustainability policies through doing so. And I think if these solutions are of interest to your brand and you aren't yet a partner of Pat for Good or Canopy Star, then we're happy to support you, with the first step being putting in place a policy that sets targets and commitments towards these types of solutions, and protecting forests as well.
Great. Yes, I think, it's really important, as you mentioned, around setting those targets. I've seen more brands in the past year set some targets around circularity, even if it's bringing 5 or 10% of the total quantity of fibers to have coming from circular sources, recycled in some way. For Lenzing, we started in 2017 with Refibre, offering that full, we provide the full fiber. It's not that we have to work separately. We do provide Refibre that we ship around the world to different suppliers. And I think it's always important to ask questions of where you're receiving, what kind of waste is being used, what percentage, where is it coming from? So these are all a part of it. But starting the first step of having brands with goals related to this is so important. We talk about collaborations because circularity is around having a network. And now more than ever, we realize how important that is. We cannot do it alone. The goals that are set by brands can only be achieved by working with partners and industry stakeholders, the information that they can provide and the support. Jordan, how are you collaborating? How do you encourage mills to get more involved in looking at circular solutions and developments?
It's a challenge, but the most important thing is do your research and have values and stick to them. I've tried working with some of the best, what some people would call the best mills in the world, and they couldn't do the high amount of cotton recycling that I wanted to do. I found the right people that took me serious, and we tried doing things differently. And the most important thing was, once again, not looking at just one small point of the picture, but looking at the full picture itself. And that's actually how I got introduced into, cellulosic fibers. Really was I was using them in a different way that I didn't feel was really utilizing their full potential. And so when I started recycling high amounts of cotton and denim, instead of looking at it like, hey, let's just do what everybody else is doing, is recycle cotton into the weft yarn because it's easy. I said, well, why are we going to do that? Because it's going to make the material look worse. It's going to make it look ugly. It's going to make it look gray and dingy, and no one's going to like that. And that's the thing about sustainability is you can't suffer quality and style and design for, just because it's better for the earth. It has to be both, which is never fun because that makes everything more difficult once again. But it's possible, and you just have to find the right people. And, I was very lucky that I found a really good partner in Turkey, and they had a really good sense of spinning yarn with recycled cotton. And I asked them to create a yarn that was combined with Tencel and recycled cotton, and just a very small amount, trying to reduce the organic cotton down to the most minimal amount of virgin organic. And I was very lucky that we were able to succeed. And most of that success actually came from is going to be the Tencel Lyosa yarn, because it actually was stronger than even regular organic cotton. And these are the things that I didn't really realize, and I wasn't utilizing the full potential. And even at this point in time, I don't think I had ended up going to Lindsay yet. I didn't really discover things. And this is why I use that chef analogy beforehand, because it's like when you go down there and you're talking to the people that are, making your materials or your ingredients, shall I say, you really learn a lot more. You connect also to the supply chain, which also then brings you further into the ethics of taking care of the people in the supply chain. And that's one of the most important things is once you start diving deeper, you start to really discover how to utilize your resources. And the next step from where we went from just combining recycled cotton and Tencel together is we started combining Refibre technology with the Tencel and combining that with the recycled. And this is what really created an extremely great team of fibers and a material that had extremely strong strength. We even used a natural bio-based indigo dye to come over and dye over the recycled cotton that had a little bit of contamination in it, because we were combining both our post-industrial cutting waste and even a small amount of post-consumer waste. And the way that we were able to do this was because of the success of finding different ways of combining sustainability together. And some people are going to resist this. Some people are going to say that's a bad idea. Some people are going to say, oh, well, our standards are higher. Like for instance, my most recent challenge is getting people to stray away from adding high amounts of plastics into jeans, which makes them unrecyclable. Right now, recycled plastic is the biggest topic because it's easy. And easy, also another word for easy could be this word that I know a lot of people that work in this supply chain working with brands is cost neutral. Nothing like a good old cost neutral solution to sustainability, which is oftentimes if it's cost neutral, then you're not doing it right. And that's what recycled plastic offers, because it's for lack of better words, the best word I can come up with, and I apologize for my profanity, is bullshit. And these are just ways for people to, let's just say, take an easy pass or shortcut. Natural fibers are renewable, they're biodegradable, they have extremely good properties. And if you find partners that are being able to combine things like Lindsay's doing, which is sourcing trees the correct way, not using ancient forests, that they're also putting effort back into growing trees, which is a really important thing. But also one of my favorite topics, which is not something that we normally talk about when we're talking about trees, but is water treatment. Most people don't realize what goes into making viscose and rayon, but a lot of poisonous, extremely hazardous and poisonous chemicals come out of the process. And I know that there's a lot of different companies around the world that were mentioned earlier, but the most unfortunate circumstances is a lot of these people and their transparency of allowing you to come in there and look at their water treatment plant. That's like trying to go into the forbidden city of, it's like, they don't want you to go in there. They don't want you to see this. And that's what really drew me to working with companies is their transparency. How far are they going to let me go? And I like to ask a lot of questions, and I like to put the hard hat on there, and people take me out to where the water treatment plants are. Lindsay has done this countless times for me. They even let me film, which is something that you would never be able to get a camera anywhere near those Indian or Indonesian or China-based, man-made cellulosic fiber plants, because it is expensive, and it doesn't produce better product or produce anything that's going to improve the price point of what you have to sell. It's just doing the right thing, because if you don't do the right thing, people die. Not like, oh, they're just going to get a little tummy ache. No, they straight up get cancer and die. Like if you see some of the pictures of these villages outside a lot of these man-made cellulosic plants around the world that are not doing things the right way, people are getting crazy sicknesses. Children, its life expectancy is extremely low. And this is all just for the cost of being able to have a couple dollars cheaper of something. And if you actually put it into it's like cents. It's not even that much.
Yeah.
But we allow people to get away with it, which is why it's really important that consumers do their research. They ask the most difficult questions because I have to say, like, I mentioned earlier, obviously the ignorant basis of and being bliss in that format, and that people don't want to do research and they just want to be very negative, because it's easy. And guess what? When you flash names out at people, it feels good. It's a very short sensation of feeling good, but that's how those people feel. However, when you do things the right way and you empower people, that's a longer lasting feeling of knowing that not only do you feel good right now for helping, but you also feel good because you know that it's going to make the future better. So it's a long lasting sensation. And we get a lot of customers, followers, consumers, whatever you want to call them, that come to our website and they'll tell us grammatical errors. They'll mention anything that they see wrong, and those people point out so much that helps us because we can't. I'm a small team too. We have under 10 employees. I don't have big sustainability people that are doing the research, and then CEOs are just being like, "That's great, good job. Go back to your office and play around." It's like, I would love to have that person come work for me, but I can't afford it like they can. They can afford it because they can just pay somebody to put a sustainability report together and then hide behind all the curtains and facades because it's too deep to go that far to figure out if people have water treatment plants. And the great thing is that there are a lot of resources like Canopy, FSC, even the water treatment world. We have things like the ZDHC, Oecotex, DOTS. So it's just, and it's a very technical information, but a lot of customers nowadays, as mentioned earlier in this conversation, they're getting smart. They're becoming more, and especially with what the U.S. just went over through the last 4 years. I mean, people are really starting to take this fake news things pretty seriously when the person that's saying it's fake news is the one that's giving you the fake news. So everyone now hopefully knows that you can't believe anything that's being told to you.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot of changes, and some points I just want to hit on. It is even the small incremental changes that are important, Jordan, that you mentioned, and finding like-minded people. I even say companies. It's really like-minded people within those companies that you work with, and I think you've done that really well. I want to encourage people to. I know we have some questions in the chat, but if you have any more, we're going to get into our final question and in our discussion portion of this. And it's from recent sustainability report that was published on Business of Fashion. It was stated that companies need to move past target setting to demonstrate tangible progress. And with less than 10 years left to deliver on the global climate and sustainable development goals, time is running out. And simply stating an ambition to change is no longer good enough. Some of the most high-profile opportunities, like establishing more circular business models, show only gradual uptake. So really, Ellie, how can we move the needle to deliver on this change? What can we do for the future?
Well, fortunately, many of the solutions that are required for us to deliver the change at the pace that we need already exist. And many governments and also businesses have set goals and targets to get us there. So towards the start of 2020, as Trisha mentioned, Canopy launched a report called Survival, which you can find on our website, which has an action plan to save forests and climate by scaling up next generation solutions. So it sets out what's an ambitious but achievable plan over the next 10 years for reducing by 50% the amount of forest fiber going into pulp and paper, packaging and viscose through reduction, and also using these next generation alternatives. And the report found that along with reduction, there is enough waste inputs such as agricultural residues and recycled clothing to replace the amount of forest fiber, and that this transformation could take place by 2030 to meet the global targets that are set. it determined that the investment that would be needed over these 10 years would be $69 billion, which sounds like a lot. But to put that in perspective, this was a similar price to what Botox was sold as in 2018. So if we're willing to put that amount of money towards Botox, then I think we're willing to put that amount of money towards saving the planet. Now, to put that in perspective, when Canopy Style began in 2013, we were told by many that recycling textiles to make viscose, rayon, or lyocell was not going to happen. But here we are just a few years later, and there are 3 products on market from some of the biggest players in the industry. And the interest from the investment community to do what was already done in a similar way to alternative renewable energy exists in this space as well. So what Canopy is doing is trying to harness the collective interest of our corporate partners to set the stage for big advancements. And we have lots of hope, and we feel that we can accomplish this if more brands join us and are willing to use these innovative fibers for their products.
Great. Yes. Thanks. Thanks, Ellie. And definitely the scalable solutions of how we can achieve these within this decade. Jordan, your vision for the future, how do you see that we can really make this change? I mean, you've given us some of your thoughts, but how would you summarize that?
Well, I think everyone's just gotta do their part and do something. It's like what you said earlier about it's progress over perfection, and the most important thing is just the bigger companies understanding that they are not going to be anywhere close to being perfect. It's going to take them a long time, and to stop, as we can say, is stop trying to over project that you're going to do something within a certain amount of time when you all know that you're not going to do it, because unfortunately, a lot of these businesses are failing. They're not, the only way that they are surviving is that they are actually making things cheaper. They're making things worse. That's how a lot of these bigger companies are staying afloat, because they're building, their design is the opposite of circular. It's literally, we're going to make a product knowing that we're going to fail, that we know that we're not going to sell it at full price. We're going to have to sell it off price or on a deep discount. So we're just going to make it knowing that, which means the only way to do that is usually is to use worse materials, use the cheapest viscose that you can find, and then market it that it's made of bamboo. Ooh, fancy. And this sort of instance is what is really, that's what needs to be torn down. And the consumers are going to have a big place in that, because, and also hopefully journalists, what I'm hoping is that all those publications that keep wanting to charge people money to write articles about how sustainable that they are, they'll be like, hey, maybe instead of just taking $75,000 from somebody to write an article about how they are not sustainable, but just saying that they're sustainable would be great. And then send somebody out somewhere to go do some actual investigative journalism. That would be really cool. Remember when that used to, remember when journalists had to actually go do some journalism instead of being like, hey, you got to write about these people that just paid us. Yeah, I know it's probably not against your morality, but just do it, because we got to keep the lights on. Who cares about everybody else? Let's just take care of ourselves so we can all go on that nice vacation next year and spend a bunch of money on things that are probably just going to make the world worse, because we're not going to offset any of it or care about renewable resources or any of that sort of stuff. And that sort of mentality earlier that I said, whatever makes you feel good. So people don't want to do the research. They'd be like, okay, somebody told me this is sustainable. I'm happy. Right. I don't want anybody to tell me it's not, because then I'm not going to be happy and I'm going to feel bad. And that's the last thing I want, because we live in a society where you're not supposed to feel bad. But guess what? You are. And that's the life. You just have to learn how to deal with it and improve on making yourself and doing things that, help others. And that happiness is one of the best happinesses that you can probably soak in. It's an energy that
no, that purpose is far greater. And I think you're also talking about the overconsumption and overproduction that we have within our industry. So we do have a couple of questions here that I want to get to. One of, how does Lenzing obtain cotton waste? How is it sourced? So we do work with our partners, our retailer and brand partners. We do assess their existing waste. We continue to try to find other sources. Actually, the waste is not as much of a challenge as actually getting it in the right place and processing it. I see that more of a challenge for us. And so the waste really is not as much of an issue. The next question we had is the differentiation between Refibre by lensing from RenewCell and Evernew or other chemically recycled cellulosic fibers. Well, being from lensing, I can only comment on Refibre. However, we do want to highlight with Refibre that we also manage with the pulp production. So we produce the fiber. We are using a 30% blend level. We're using the lyocell production process. And we do have a list of questions that we encourage people to ask when researching recycled fibers, chemically recycled fibers, like where is the waste coming from, how much. And Ellie, maybe you can highlight some of the resources that Canopy has as well regarding the other fibers.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a page on our website, our Next Generation Solutions Providers page, which lists the innovators that are producing technologies, that have products on the market for viscose and paper and packaging as well. So you can check that page out so you can look at the differences between the different providers, which maybe, you know, the input, whether using pre and post-consumer recycled, and whether it's a dissolving pulp product or a fiber. So yeah, happy to provide that link for follow-up as well.
Great. Yeah, just to highlight, we also have with Refibre, it's the lyocell production process, not viscose right now. We will be expanding into viscose and modal, like I mentioned in our vision. And we also have the traceability and transparency, because I think these will become challenges in the future as well. More questions about, is it actually coming from a recycled material? Dan, there's several questions here, I think related to some of your comments, but how expensive is recycled cotton compared to virgin cotton? And how do you source recycled cotton for production? I'm assuming here they're talking about mechanically recycled cotton, but maybe you could address mechanically recycled and as well as the chemical recycling.
Yeah, obviously, you know, mechanical is mostly just going to be energy and supply chain resources that are going to go into the cost, considering that the fiber already exists. Most recycled cotton is fairly cost neutral. It just depends when it comes to the material and the way that you spin the yarn. So this is where you have to figure out ways to be creative. But most people are going to charge a little bit more also just because it's more difficult, it's new to them. So a lot of this comes down to just putting in time to improve the resources. The cellulosic atmosphere of doing chemical recycling is going to be more expensive because there is a higher amount of resources, but also you have to imagine, and this is what I like to use the word upcycling for. In the process of creating, you know, something like the Refibre technology, you're upcycling, you're taking waste and turning it actually into something far superior than even recycled cotton. Recycling mechanically is definitely no different than taking a can, turning it into a can. You know, this is the important thing because you have to remember that recycling mechanically, you're shortening the staple yarn, so the quality is getting a little bit worse, so it makes it a little bit more difficult for the spinners and the mills to work with. So that's the best way to explain it there. I always tell people, play around, see what people are doing. And also just like what Trisha said, asking where you know, if they're doing mechanical, where it's coming from. And, you know, I love to blend recycled and Refibre together. That whole concept of the mechanical and the chemical, it's a great partnership. Makes for a great story, makes for great quality. I know that it was mentioned earlier about how, you know, Refibre dyes just like Tencel. Tencel absorbs dye very well, has great fastness. It also has amazing other properties too, like, you know, microbial properties and interesting perspectives that really make the quality better. So that's what's really important, is figuring out a way to improve things. You know, if you take a plastic water bottle and turn it into like a sweatshirt, you're just making, you're like, it's like the Warren Buffett of making problems. You're taking this like tangible object of grabbing a piece of plastic from the ocean or from the ground and be like, let's put that in the recycling can. And now you're like, hey, Let's turn it into dust and spread it everywhere where you can't even pick it up. And we're just going to have to deal with it years later. But by that point in time, all the coral's going to be dead in the ocean, and all the fish were for some godforsaken reason thinking it was food. But if you all have dogs, you know that dogs will eat anything that's on the ground because they're just trying to find food. So imagine the fish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what you're talking about, Jordan, is textile to textile recycling. Instead of taking waste from one stream, putting it into another, you're just kind of passing the problem around, which is kind of the debate that comes up with polyester. And yeah, there are a lot of advantages of mixing the mechanically recycled cotton, which has shorter staples with less strength than, and so what we find has worked really well with spinners is that when they combine the mechanically recycled cotton with chemically recycled Tencel Lyosa or Refibre, or blending it even with Tencel Lyosa, that helps to balance out as a carrier fiber. There's a couple other comments here, and I guess we'll just take one or two more in closing on time. For lensing, the challenge is still in recycling post-consumer waste and contaminants such as the dyeing and finishing content. Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's hard in post-consumer to know how the garment was treated, if there's topical treatments, if there's any coatings or laminates. Also, pigment dyes remain an issue, not only for what lensing is doing around chemical recycling, but this is common around for everyone, is having issues around how to deal with pigments. And of course, the challenges around synthetics. So fiber separation technology is an area that needs to advance further in order for us to achieve some of the goals that, even Canopy has discussed. So I would say those are some of the challenges around contaminants that we see. Barriers and challenges in raising the recycled content of Refibre. So right now we're at 30%. We want to get to 50% recycled content. And that is to maintain the quality level. I mentioned our success that we've seen in the market in commercializing Refibre is because it can be interchanged with Tencel Lyosa, because we've established and engineered a fiber like Refibre technology that is equal to Tencel Lyosa. So that makes it much easier in the processing. So for lensing, we want to maintain the integrity and quality of the fiber. And I think a lot of this remains to be seen of what can still be developed in the market. So for right now, we're setting our sights on 50% by 2025. I know there's a couple other questions. Maybe we can answer them directly for people, because I see Anna has come back on, and we want to wrap up. And in wrapping up, I would just like to say if everyone can give how they can be reached or for more information. So Ellie, what's the best way to reach you, and how can people get more information?
Sure. So you can reach me by email. That's LEELLY .dinage. And I think we'll send this in follow-up at canopyplanet.org. And then there's many resources on the Canopy Planet website as well. And I'm happy to follow up to questions afterwards.
Great. And Jordan, if people have more questions for you, how can they reach you and look at Boyish products?
Yeah, just boyish.com. You go on there under our About Us section. You can see our sustainability page, our sustainability report, our fiber guidelines, our Cool to Care volunteer program. You can learn about all that stuff there. And then on our contact page, you can send us an email. If you have any of these questions that didn't answer today, you can send them on there, and it'll make its way to me.
Great. And for me, you can email me. denim@lensing.com is one way to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn and post a lot there. And then tencel.com. And if you want to know more about what we're doing in the denim world, we have Carved in Blue, which is our blog. And you can actually see the video of Jordan in lensing and what he's talking about with Refibre. So we do have the video posted there. So Anna, I will pass it over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Trisha. And thank you, Ellie and Jordan, and everyone for attending our session today. It was very informative. So thank you so much for sharing all your expertise. And then thank you again to Evoco for sponsoring this session, and to South Pole for offsetting the emissions associated with this webinar series. So unfortunately, we have to wrap up. But we do have our third session starting at 12 EST. So if you are joining us for those, there's enough time for a short break, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again.